really well from Facebook, and Dave Morgan, who I know super well from Simul Media, who's one of Techonomy's closest friends and supporters. Carolyn oversees all ad sales at Facebook, but really interestingly, did you bring that slide we talked about, by the way?
I did, but I don't think they can use it.
They can't use it.
They're trying to figure out if they can use it.
Okay, well,
So
if we can use it, let us know. Jill, will you do that? Okay. In any case, what's interesting about the slide is how big picture of a view Carolyn has adopted, as she's basically running the biggest, fastest growing ad platform in the world, really. I mean, it's becoming a landscape altering advertising medium, Facebook is, and I've always said the targetability of it was something that was unstoppably distinct and unique. So I don't know what to say to start out. I mean, the point is to discuss with, and Dave wrote an article for Facebook for Techonomy, about this just this week, that we're really moving into an entirely different landscape of marketing and advertising. And I guess maybe, I know what Dave thinks, and I'll ask him to sort of state that again from what he wrote about the other day, but when you think about the big picture of how the landscape for marketing and advertising is changing, what is your biggest observation?
Well, this is the most significant shift we've ever seen as marketers, as business leaders. Davos dubbed it the fourth industrial revolution in January. And when you look back to the prior three industrial revolutions, they were viewed as dramatic, disruptive. People had a lot of fear about what was going to happen with the economy and jobs. And yet this one is moving faster than anything we have ever seen, and it's being driven by a number of factors. One is just the explosion of connectivity. We now have about 60% of the world that's still not connected, which if you think about what the opportunity is when the additional few billion people come online, it is going to fundamentally rewire all economies at scale. It'll change the way we do financial services, education, healthcare. It's going to be incredibly dramatic, I think, to the global economy. So connectivity is one theme, and underneath that, of course, is mobile. The fact that we now all have a supercomputer in the palm of our hand that is 100,000 times more powerful than the computer used to send the first man to the moon gives us information at our fingertips that also, for marketers, completely rewrites the rules around what's expected. Now that you have the most personal device you've ever had, the expectation from consumers is that if you show up on my mobile phone, you must be showing up in a relevant, useful, delightful way. And so the combination of the science and the art is really at a stage that we've never seen before in the industry. What is the same? Content and creativity matter. Brands matter incredibly at a very high level. Storytelling is incredibly important. And so there's some similar craft skills that have been important since you wrote the first television ad or you wrote the first radio ad or print ad. But using the sophistication of the data so that you show up in a really relevant way is changing all the way marketers are thinking. And it's not only changing the way they're marketing. I would argue this is a much bigger, profound shift than marketing. And that's why, if we can show the slide, we will. But the way we think about it is businesses not only have to rewire the way they do marketing, they often have to rewire the way they do business. The disruption that's happening on a given day of 1,000 apps trying to get approved from iOS and Android means 1,000 companies every single day are trying to take over. Here's the chart that I use, which will build A and B as sort of your traditionally large companies. Pick whichever vertical you want them to be. It can be travel, it can be CPG, it can be auto, retail, et cetera. A and Bs have been around a long time. Some are growing at single digits, some are flattening, some are declining. You have then the XYZs that are coming into the market. X's have completely disrupted a particular brand or category, or in some cases, an entire industry.
Like, for example, what would you use?
So, for example, what I would say, if you were to take the travel industry, let's take retail, for example. Amazon is clearly an X. Now, where is it on the X line? You can debate that. However, there are players in the market that look at Amazon as more of an A and B and is flattening out, and they're coming in to try to disrupt Amazon, like Jet. and Context Logic and other e-commerce companies. You get the Zs who get a lot of venture capital. They get very excited. They come into the market with a big splash and then they implode. The challenge is if you're an A or B company, the data is very much against you. The average Fortune 500 company used to have a projected lifespan of 75 years. Now the projected lifespan of a Fortune 500 company is 15 years. So the rate of disruption is at a pace we've never ever seen before. So what do you do if you're an A or B? I mean, from what we see, you've got 4 options. Number 1, you acquire an X or a Y to inject that into the system. Number 2, you build a parallel org. You put it in Silicon Valley or Israel or India and you try to build up a second business model. Number 3, you invest. You at least have a venture fund so you can at least partake in the growth. The 4th, you rewire your culture. It's really hard to rewire a culture. But I've got to say, most A and B CEOs that I speak to are very much trying to rewire their culture.
Trying, but succeeding in many cases?
It's super hard to do. If you look at, again, the history, the first time the Fortune 500 list was created was 1955. And if you look at what happened, where are those companies in 2015, 85% of them are gone. So what does gone mean? A third have been merged or acquired. A third still exists, but they're no longer Fortune 500 companies. They've shrunk. And a third are just totally gone. Very few companies can deal with it. And the disruption we're seeing now, those X's and Y's, we've never had it coming at this pace ever in the history of business.
We had a great discussion opening the day on the Internet of Things and industrial internet and how that's transforming business. And we really didn't get to the culture question, although all 4 of the panelists believe very deeply that the implications of that transformation are vast for what kind of company, in terms of its own mindset, will be able to thrive in the future. But Dave, let's just bring you in here, because you are a big picture thinker. Your company has figured out a way to target traditional TV advertising using digital techniques, which is quite sophisticated, and you even work with Facebook to some degree in doing that. But when you listen to Carolyn and when you look at the landscape, what do you think is going on at the biggest picture level?
So I think, and let's, we'll focus on sort of the consumer, the large enterprises that sell consumer goods and services. They're entering into a world where everything has sort of been mapped out in very long-term, very, sort of constant notion that we'll just keep doing these things. You do sort of exception-based planning. If something doesn't work, you just try to understand what didn't work and you patch that. And we've shifted now to where we have a consumer-driven economy. And so we had all these big brands that were built for decades, sort of in the post-World War II era, on manufacturing, distribution, logistics. And so marketing and branding was, there's only 3 peanut butters that are going to make it to the little general store in the little town. Jif, Skippy, and Peter Pan, just be better than one of those. Or how do those 3 work? Now we have a world where there's theoretically thousands of peanut butters available to everybody, from what you're going to get in Union Square to what you can get from Amazon. And none of these companies, none of them are designed to think like consumer companies. They've never been designed to think and listen. They've relied on the wholesalers and the distributors. I mean, think about this, how many bottles or cans of soda or water or liquid does the Coca-Cola company sell to consumers in the United States every year? How many?
Zero?
Zero.
Yeah.
Zero. They sell syrup, they sell to distributors, they sell to wholesalers, they don't sell any. None of the historical U.S. auto manufacturers are allowed to sell cars to consumers in the United States. They have to take their orders from dealers who more often than not have franchises with their competitors too. So they're not wired for that, so they don't understand that. And so I think the big deficit that has happened and that is going to really collapse a lot of these companies is they stop marketing. They don't understand how to market. It is the lowest paid member of the C-suite by far in those companies.
The CMO? Yep.
The CMO, or the person who's running marketing.
Is that right? I didn't know.
Oh yeah, I mean, you think about, they don't last very long. Everything they do is sort of on the lowest cost. So if you had someone you cared about, or a cousin or someone that got arrested, you would sort of want to have the highest priced lawyer take care of them if you could. But when they want to market their product, they actually want to find the cheapest agency, and that's what they talk about, how little we pay. They don't talk about how much they made, what the return was. And I think that they're going to get killed, and they are getting killed now by pure digital companies, and then they're going to get killed by the hybrid companies. And I think it's a real interesting, in your perspective, now you're doing this, which will it be? Will it actually be the digital companies that will hybridize and add the legacy characteristics to their companies, because they're pure marketers at heart in most cases, rather than the legacy companies trying to buy the digital?
It's such an important point that Dave's mentioning on the cost. So the whole industry has been run on what I would describe are proxy metrics, meaning we look for the lowest CPMs, we measure impressions, we measure video views or clicks. And if you look at the X's and Y's, why they're so good and why they're growing so quickly, they measure everything on business outcomes. Are we driving customer acquisition? Are we driving mobile app installs? They measure and optimize to a degree where we have some of our X's and Y's that literally have hundreds of thousands of options for their ads per day. That is not the way a traditional A or B company operates, right? The entire industry has been wired to produce a 30-second spot, have it last a period of time. And so not only do the marketers have to rewire their culture, but the whole entire ecosystem around them does. I think to Dave's point, there are X's and Y's that very much want to be like A's and B's on that chart. They want to be around for the next 100+ years. They want to build brands, but they've built that core digital, everything is oriented around the consumer. And if you were going to start a financial services company today, it would be a fintech company. It would be some type of mobile payments. If you were going to start a commerce company today, you're likely going to put it on a mobile device and build an m-commerce and e-commerce strategy. If you're building a travel company, it's going to look a lot more like Airbnb or Uber or some type of a sharing economy. So everything is being rewritten in a way that the A's and B's have to fundamentally change the way they work. It's going to be a real big challenge.
Yeah, I mean, think of it, look at the razor business. So
Yes,
we have Dollar
razor.
Shave Club, which is, a 5-year-old company, maybe 6. It's already the number 3. It's coming in very close to number 1 and 2. You have the number 1, Gillette, owned by Procter & Gamble, that will certainly not be owned by Procter & Gamble in the next 24 months, which is supposed to be the greatest marketing company, but will not be holding on to its brands anymore as it starts, because it's got activist shareholders. It's not adding any value. And so if a franchise like that can be collapsed that quickly by a venture capital financed startup making the exact same kind of product from the same factories basically in China, like what does the legacy of Cincinnati and Procter & Gamble mean if it can be beaten in one of its biggest products so quickly?
The challenge for any A or B is how capital allows the X's and Y's to grow with permission for extended periods of time to not be profitable. There's completely different rules for how an X and Y can acquire capital and grow and not be asset intensive when you compare that to A and B's who have to produce quarterly results. And so we've got 2 sets of standards which are making it incredibly difficult for A and B's to rewire themselves.
In different cost structures, because if you think
Correct.
the Dollar Shave Club didn't think it needed to own factories and own distribution and own logistics and own a lot of physical real estate to do its business. So it didn't even have to raise that capital to do it. So it needed a lot less, and it had a lot of tolerance.
Well, one of the common things about your 2 businesses, which kind of was evoked for me by the comment about CMOs trying to spend as little as possible, and while they're getting paid less than everybody else, which is an interesting side point, is that you 2 both are extraordinary targeters, right? And you can therefore deliver predictable results that might cost more in some cases than a traditional ad, but can be tied to specific outcomes, right? I mean, just talk a little bit about that psychology and how that's been, received by the marketers. And obviously, it's your biggest selling point, but just talk a little bit about it.
Well, I think this shift from proxy metrics to real business metrics and just the relentless focus on are we driving a business outcome, that's been our mantra in the market. And everything we do is oriented towards are we driving a business outcome? And I think we have a pretty unique position in the marketplace around that. A lot of other media companies are not talking about don't buy us unless you actually think we're driving a business outcome, because they have a very hard time proving that.
You say that to them.
Absolutely. I tell clients, don't invest with us. Unless you think we're driving your business, you should not be investing with us. It's a very different message than I think that they hear from other more traditional companies. But I deeply believe that, you know, the CMO is there's one word for a CMO at the end of the day: growth. They are responsible for driving growth in the business. And in order to do that, every dollar that they invest needs to be working for them. It may be a short term. Did we drive an e-commerce or a customer acquisition or some type of offline conversion? It could be a long-term objective around building a brand. Some of these things don't happen, you know, instantaneously. Brands can take a very long time to build. But all that we do is oriented towards business outcomes. So for example, let me take a car company. If you talk to the folks in Detroit, they will tell you that the majority, it's like over 99% of their television budgets are actually not working efficiently for them at all, which makes sense. If I were to ask this room how many people bought a car this last weekend, we'll try. Has anybody bought a car in the last 30 days in this room? Okay, a few people.
3 people.
Okay, so for the few people that raised their hand, they do not probably want to see another ad from another car company anytime soon.
I told my husband this morning I can't see their ad.
Okay? You don't want to see one. What you might want to see, if you're like me, we buy these cars that are like computers now. I don't even know how to work half the thing. I'd like maybe, if somebody's going to message me, tell me at least how to use the car that I just bought. Tell me.
Yeah,
Right?
there you go.
So, but maybe, and then out of the rest of you, let me ask the question again. How
Right,
many of
the
you
manual
think,
is not going to help.
how many of you think you're going to buy a car in the next 3 months? Okay, so guess what?
Another 3, okay.
The ads should be laser targeted to them with very specific messages. We know what car you may be driving. We know you're coming off lease. So we should become much more efficient with our spend. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get the right message to the right person at the right time, which I know sounds like Pollyanna, but guess what? We can do that now with the capabilities we have.
Well, and I know you could do that in a different way, Dave, but you know, I want to go to the audience because there's so many, I'm sure there's a lot of interest in asking you guys some things, but you wrote in Techonomy this very interesting piece, Dave, about how really the central function of companies increasingly is becoming marketing. So talk about what you mean by that.
Well, Peter Drucker said, 60 years ago that the only purpose of the corporation was the creation of customer, and the only 2 business functions that mattered were marketing and innovation, and everything else was cost. And I think that for a bunch of reasons, most of the large companies that grew up in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s did not have marketing at the center. They actually made the management of their costs and financial leverage sort of the center of the business. I think that in this digital economy now, marketing has to move back to the center. I think we're going to see a real change. I think one of the biggest resistance to change in the companies have been a fear of like looking bad for the way they used to do things, and it's why change has been so slow. And I think that that's going to change because the companies can be disrupted so quickly. The companies with things, I mean, we wouldn't expect the food business, for example, to be hit as hard as it is, but you go down here and you'll see Amazon pickers in these, in the grocery stores, and Walmart has 50% of its business today is food and groceries, and it's going to get hammered. And so I think we're now going to see marketing become much more central. I think we're going to see people that are going to become CEOs, and I think we'll see a model where people will model themselves. What I'd written was that they're going to model much more on a Mark Zuckerberg kind of person who listens, who is a savant to the product and the consumer, than they will on a Steve Ballmer, who was a Procter & Gamble trained brand manager who was all about managing channel.
So, one of the things I was trying to get at with Arun when he talked about crowd-based capitalism is the implications for product development, because that is a big subset of the theme you're talking about, which if the company's primary function is marketing and innovation, these 2 things have to be feeding each other really, really intimately, right? And that's what your system essentially makes possible. It's not just about selling stuff more effectively, it's about making more of the stuff that people really want by listening to them better. Is that it?
Well, the famous example at Facebook, and we have numerous ones, is how we became a place where actually people shared photos. How did that happen? Engineers were watching, because you have to go back 5, 6 years where we weren't a place that you posted photos, it was text. But people, the engineering team, were noticing that every day people were changing their profile picture.
Right.
It was the only way they could change their visual identity on Facebook. And they're like, aha, people like to actually express themselves visually. Next thing you know, Facebook becomes the largest photo sharing site in the world by a huge factor. The consumer, by really being completely oriented around the consumer, our belief is that that's where the innovation comes from. It's also the innovation that led us to Instagram because of visual. It led us to buy WhatsApp because we saw how much they wanted to do messaging and pull out Messenger. So you've got to be oriented around the consumer, and it's an easy thing to say, but a very hard thing to do.
But this is what you and I were talking about at lunch, Dave, that you can see Amazon and Facebook doing it because they are fundamentally digital companies that listen by definition all the time and are always watching everything their customers do, and as a result, constantly changing the product that they create, right? But you were saying that's the way every company has to become. And we were talking about how hard it is for other companies to do that.
Yeah, I mean, there isn't a question. They're not going to be able, if they don't understand the consumer and aren't listening and aren't able to change the product, change manufacturing, innovate into it, they're not going to survive. It's not going to be possible. And I think that what is hard for people to sort of accept is that we have these ideas that these lines like the A and the B that they'll just sort of slowly go this way. I mean, they won't. And it's sort of like the Ernest Hemingway line when he was the Hemingway-esque character in The Sun Also Rises is asking the English boyfriend of his love interest, like how he went bankrupt because he was a trust fund kid.
How did he go bankrupt, right?
And he said, well, how did you go bankrupt? And he said, well, two ways. Gradually, then suddenly. And that's what's going to happen to the A's and the B's. I mean, they aren't just going to, it will go that quickly.
Okay, I want to hear some audience reaction to any of this. Okay, I like Michael, and I haven't seen him in a long time, so I'm going to call on him again. Michael Schrag, please wait for the mic.
Michael Schrag with MIT. I just want to reinforce the point, but use it to ask you to expand on it. Very few poets are great mathematicians. How many of the A's and B's, Carolyn, you said explicitly, people shouldn't work with you unless they are prepared to invest for a change in business outcome. How many of people you talk with, and please be as honest as you can without embarrassing anybody, are quantitatively capable of taking advantage of the portfolio of targeting and predictive analytics, deep learning, machine learning options that you have? Is it 50%, 20%, 2%?
So we have 3 million advertisers right now on Facebook, and if you took the Fortune 100 companies, I would tell you that at the senior levels, they totally get what needs to be done. Totally. Intellectually, from an intellectual curiosity standpoint, from the mandate. If you talk to the more, like the 24-year-olds who've only grown up in this world, they get it. Where the problem often is in the middle layer, the middle management. So even when CMOs or CEOs declare that they want to shift to be more business outcome, value-driven, use the data to be targeted, obviously, all the things that we've just talked about, stuff gets lost sometimes in the system. And certain companies are doing everything they can to reduce that friction. But I would say, I mean, now look, we're many, many years into this journey, right? If you were to ask me that 4 or 5 years ago when I first got to Facebook, we were still only talking about likes, shares, and comments. We weren't even driving the conversation the way we needed to. And we've made a very significant shift over the last handful of years, which basically took the position, we want to be here a lot longer than any of our individuals are going to be here. And in order to build a lasting company, we've got to do one thing, and that is to drive growth for clients. And we need clients to trust and believe we're driving their growth. So we want to be fully measured. The top and the very junior ones get it. It's the middle management that sometimes trips us up.
Okay.
And I would say it's
Quickly,
not the math issue as much as just being empirical, just being willing to recognize that you might need to be rational. And that's what's missing a lot of times. There's a belief that marketing can be irrational.
Okay, get the mic here. Thank you.
Hi, Sultan. We do a lot of big data analysis around counterterrorism data more recently. A lot of this typically was agency data over the past 4 or 5 years. One of the things that we've seen is, and you keep talking about disruption, one of the big things with the agency world is getting them to shift quickly enough where they have a tremendous amount of spend. On the State Department, and really with a lot of these non-governmental actors, what we're seeing is the challenge. ISIS has a 250-person social media shop that operates, and they're buying media through third-party agencies and that sort of thing. What can we do to partner with organizations like you to kind of provide some of the educational disruption that's necessarily needed inside of not just the NGO space, but the government space?
So we have a program. One of the biggest things that we do is education, to try to inspire the agency community and marketing community at large. And so we have now over 200,000 people that have used something called Blueprint, which we basically take all the training that we give internally at Facebook. We all go through the training. We are tested twice a year. I mean, it's very intense. You have to understand what's going on with the product. We've made that completely available to the agency ecosystem. And so I'd be happy to follow up with you after if you think that that could be of use to the government organizations. I don't believe any government organizations, to my knowledge, have taken the courses. It's all online. It's free. That gives them the basic tools, and then it becomes more advanced on how to think about utilizing our platforms.
Okay. Anybody who hasn't spoken before? Okay, no, go ahead. Or maybe you didn't. You just spoke to me at lunch. Oh, you did? Okay, whatever.
I run a website for tech-savvy folks over age 50, and our marketing...
Hold the mic closer.
Our marketing budget is infinitesimal. So I struggle with every dime that we spend. And we've spent a lot of time looking around, and the only place we found that actually delivers the audience that we want with pinpoint accuracy is Facebook. And
She hates hearing that.
Can I take you on all my meetings?
and we're getting roughly about a 5% conversion rate, which we think is pretty good on most of the stuff we're putting in. But I deal with all of these other companies, especially in consumer tech, that just don't understand what it is we're trying to do and have absolutely no clue as to how to market to a tech-savvy 50-plus audience, where you guys have got it nailed. What is it going to take to bring the rest of the world along with you?
So every time I hear that either a marketer doesn't know how to utilize us or an agency, I view that as my problem and my fault and my team's fault, and we just got to continue to do a better job, because this is we have a platform that is proven again and again that it drives business growth. From anybody taking the money out of their pocket, which are the small businesses, I mean, they're your toughest customers, because they're taking the money out of their pocketbook or out of the cash register, and they're giving it to you, and sometimes it's $10 a day budget. And that to them is all they can do, and they're depending on us to drive their business. We view it as we've got to now reach we have 50 million businesses that have a presence on Facebook, and only 3 million are advertising. So just do the math of 50 million minus 3 million, 47 million businesses that we need to get to. It's not just businesses, a lot of those are nonprofits, et cetera, but we've got a lot of work to do. So I view it as our job to educate the market. It's hard. Scaling this education is one of the biggest challenges. That's why we have the Blueprint. That's why we have a team of people, but we don't have enough resources to get out to the need. The need is so great. Every time I live in Montclair, New Jersey. Every time I shop small in my town, people are like, can you please help me with my Facebook? I'm ready to put my husband into business. He's at home working. I'm like, you need to build a company to advise small businesses. There's such a great need out there. But I view it as something we have to do.